During the time of the pharaohs, the city of Karnak was a shining example of civilization that all other nations could only hope to emulate. Today, Karnak lives on, surrounded by the spirits of the past. However, something has gone terribly wrong.
PowerSlave, also known as Exhumed in Europe, was released on the PC in 1996 before being ported over to the Saturn sometime in late 1996 and PlayStation 1 sometime in 1997. There appears to be a lot of confusion over the release dates of this game, but we do know that the PC version was built first using 3D Realms' build engine, the same engine that would eventually go on to run Duke Nukem 3D, although it was slightly enhanced. PowerSlave's name appears to take reference from the 1984 Iron Maiden album of the same name, as both share the Egyptian motif. PowerSlave begins our three-part look at a very skilled developer known as Lobotomy Software. Unable to port the PC version to the SEGA Saturn or the PlayStation 1 exactly as it was on the PC, the company decided to create a brand new engine called Slave Driver, which would go on to power both the Saturn ports of Quake and Duke Nukem 3D. Interestingly enough, the PlayStation port of Quake was actually never released because it could never find a publisher. We'll discuss that a little bit more next week. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Saturn version of PowerSlave. And to start, I'd like to mention that Lobotomy Software was made up of ex-Nintendo of America developers. These were extremely talented individuals, and you can clearly see that in the video. This game looks strikingly impressive for a system that wasn't supposed to be able to handle 3D graphics, or at least as well as the competition. This didn't go unnoticed by SEGA, who after the success of PowerSlave, would hit them up to develop ports of Quake and Duke Nukem 3D for the Saturn after the unimpressive demos that other developers had given to SEGA. Alright, I think that basically covers the fundamentals, so let's jump on in about the game itself. From a technical standpoint, this is a very impressive game. PowerSlave features a true 3D world and even featured a dynamic lighting system. Like most of the popular first-person shooters of the time, enemies are represented by 2D sprites. The whole game has an Egyptian theme, where players are trying to figure out what is going on in the ancient city of Karnak, where some unknown force has taken over. If players locate 8 hidden pieces of a radio transmitter, they can acquire the good ending. Otherwise, you're stuck with the so-called bad ending, and I won't spoil either endings here, but I actually really enjoy seeing both endings and think it's worthwhile to fail on purpose. I should also point out that there are vast differences between the PC, Saturn, and PlayStation versions of the game that go beyond a few graphical tweaks here and there. We're talking level placement is different, power-ups are different, and even an entire mini-game, which we'll get onto in just a bit, is also different. This is one of the very few instances where it's actually worthwhile to purchase all 3 versions of the game. Gameplay is standard first-person shooter fare. You make your way through various levels, taking out every enemy you can possibly find, trying to locate keys and special powers. What separates this game from its peers is that it has several Metroidvania elements to it where you can revisit previous levels with new power-ups in order to access new areas. Returning to previous areas is actually quite simple. You just locate the camel and it will pop you into the stage select screen, which is essentially a large map. From there you select your destination and away you go. One of the biggest problems with PowerSlave was the enemy designs. For about the first half of the game, the only enemy you face off against is a jumping red spider. And yes, there are occasional crows or eagles or whatever they are that fly out at you and try and peck your eyes out, but for the most part, it's spiders. Enemies do eventually get interesting later on, but I find it just takes way too long. What makes the Saturn version so special is the inclusion of a fantastic minigame known as Death Tank, and it's what you're seeing here. In order to unlock it, you need to locate all of the team dolls from the campaign, or use a cheat code like I did. The game was designed by Ezra Dresbach, and I probably butchered his name, so I apologize for that. And it allows for up to 7 players to go head-to-head in a Worms-like battle to the death. It's extremely simple, with players just selecting a different colored tank, then a sub-weapon, which range from machine guns to missiles and more. After that, they're dropped in a multi-round game where your objective is to be the last tank standing. An arrow points out of your tank that can be shrunk or stretched to determine the speed of your shot, and also you can angle the arrow to pinpoint your target. What you're seeing here is me playing with 2 controllers at the exact same time, so I apologize for the somewhat poor footage, but I think you get the idea. Believe it or not, but this would become one of the best multiplayer experiences on the Saturn because having 7 friends go to town was just a blast. Ezra would release a 4-player version of Death Tank on Xbox Live Arcade back in 2009, and he has a reworked version of Death Tank on Duke Nukem 3D that we'll cover in 2 weeks. When people ask me for hidden gems on the Saturn, this is one I like to mention. It's a fun first-person shooter that may not have dethroned Doom, but it does offer fantastic visuals on the Saturn. It features Don LaFontaine, the movie voice trailer guy, and has an incredibly addicting minigame. Bang for your buck, this one's definitely a keeper.